You know, I've mentioned this before, haven't I, about how strange it is, when you first meet the British monarchy, the British royal family for the first time, particularly if you're in like a big thing, like a variety show, a Royal Command performance or something like that. It is pretty terrifying, because if you're the act that dies, that's the theatrical term for not going well, then you kind of actually feel sorry for the royal lineup because they have to sort of come along and offer some encouraging words. They know, everybody else in the lineup knows that you've tanked, literally. But of course, there's a lot of things that you don't know about the British monarchy that literally discovered, well, one thing in particular I discovered myself while being presented in a lineup, you see. What was fascinating was we were all told about, what to do, what not to do, all of that sort of thing. And then this was the thing that really kind of stunned me in a way. About 2 minutes before the arrival of that particular royal party, this flunky came along and gave out on a silver tray all these little mints, like Tic Tacs, that sort of stuff. And we were all instructed to take a Tic Tac and make sure that, we liberally sort of put it round our mouth. This is because when the royal party spoke to you, they didn't like any foul smelling odours, halitosis, bad breath, you name it. Of course, people sweated profusely who performed. Theatres are not renowned, for their, shall we say, glamour behind the scenes, that sort of thing, right? And it got me thinking about this because, as many people know, working closely with the Royal Collection Trust and being lucky enough to go into parts of Buckingham Palace that only people can dream about, you don't realise exactly what the sort of things that they did to get up to and how certain people, part of the monarchy, literally restructured what we know today as being, well, simply the norm. Let me explain. Good to see you. Thank you so much as ever for your time. Nice to have your company. Truthfully, this is the thing. And yeah, let me tell you, when we lined up, there we were, we'd all been having these mints. And there, of course, was the then Prince Charles walking along. And of course, everybody smells and, has got wonderful, nice aroma. It reminded me also about working for this man, Sir Rocco Forti. When I worked in the hotel side of life, whenever he turned up, there was always a smell of freshly new paint, because they literally would tart everything up and make it look nice. But nobody ever thought he might take another turn down a corridor that was absolutely abysmal, maybe where the staff lived. No, it was always guided to this bit. And I often wonder if the royals know that these things go on behind the scenes. It's a bit like one of my favourite royal monarchs, none other than the late and brilliant, in my opinion, Queen Victoria. You see, Queen Victoria, I don't know if you know this, during that sort of era of the 18th century and, early 19th century, the big thing at Buckingham Palace was, of course, those magnificent ballroom outfits and balls, as it were. And did you know, I had no idea until I learnt this, that because there were very limited bathroom facilities, the ladies would relieve themselves, literally while standing, I kid you not, in a corner, and then someone would have to come along and clean it up. A flunky, yes, absolutely. And and by the time Queen Victoria moved into Buckingham Palace in 1837, there were a couple of things that she didn't particularly like, including having to meet people that she felt smelt. Yes, and so she decided that, well, what could they do about it? So what they did was they used to spray the area of perfume where this particular individual was going to be standing. And that was the reason why they were stood so far back. So you couldn't offend Her Majesty if you had an aroma. And remember, there's no showers and all that sort of stuff in that particular era. Now, one person as ever forward thinking who thought about this was none other than Prince Albert. And he had learned that, there was this now brand new fangled idea of a lavatory, toilet, flushable. Yes, none more so than that, though, that when they investigated even further, Queen Victoria realised that, in fact, you could have a shower. Very early rudimentary shower, nonetheless. Hardly warm, but nonetheless pumping water. So she instantly had one also installed in Prince Albert's private chambers, seemingly because she didn't want him to smell either. Now, Queen Victoria was fastidious about hygiene, wanting to make sure that everything was clean and fine and dandy. She particularly noticed things like fingernails and neck marks and, scuffs on collars, that sort of stuff. But it's really her that we have to thank for the fact that Buckingham Palace, even though it's going through a massive renovation right now, including the whole 78 bathrooms that they currently have, Well, it's all down to her. And apparently, though, she'd heard these rumours that the toilets apparently were exploding as well. Now, this is true because early Victorian plumbing didn't always work out well. And apparently some of the plumbing could, whatever, and suddenly explode and you'd have a burst of all of this water coming out or sewage. And she found this deplorable. But what she didn't mind was when it worked, she found that obviously she didn't need to take endless baths. The servants quite liked it because they didn't have to hoof up all of that particular water through mountains of stairs from the basement. And suddenly we had this very fragrant smelling queen. And as I say, it was really down to her at that particular era that got those sort of things going. She made the ensuite bathroom, in fact, well, a fashionable item. But the only problem is making something a fashionable item is that not everybody could afford it. So again, she'd elevated herself, and the strap on the sort of plumbing things that you could buy at that particular point, the toilets and stuff, was fit for a queen and indeed a king. And you understand how people exploited marketing and influencing and branding even back then. Well, I don't know about you, but I would say that Queen Victoria definitely had the royal flush. Naughty, I know. Neil Sean, Kensington, London.